Hello, I'm Clint Walker, and this is Real Estate Appraiser Secrets. And today we're going to talk about how the appraiser handles the more subjective aspects of a property, as well as how they handle their own personal preferences and tastes and biases in the course of doing an appraisal. So, with every property, and mostly, well, I say with every existing property, because with new construction, it's way more objective than otherwise. But when you get into existing homes, you start to get into some very subjective features and aspects of the property, like specifically I'm thinking of the condition of the property. And the appraiser's assessment of property condition is really sort of in the spotlight right now with Fannie Mae. They are starting to cross-check the appraiser's opinion of the property's condition with AI, and to see what the AI thinks about it. And I don't know, I think that's sort of fundamentally flawed, but regardless, it's really in the spotlight because opinions of condition can really vary. You know, your appraiser might walk into this as a human with really high standards of maintenance and condition elements for an existing home. And, you know, then you got the homeowner living there. And they might not, probably don't share those same standards of maintenance and upkeep. So and then if this is a lender transaction, you got a buyer involved, and is that person's the same? So these sort of standards of home maintenance and care are very subjective. And it's understandable that anybody would be concerned about the appraiser's opinion of that and how they handle their own tastes, or rein in their own standards if they're really sort of a stickler for this sort of thing personally. And the way that plays out is the appraiser looks to the comps, okay? So at the end of the day, the appraiser can be of whatever opinion, they can have whatever standards or whatever personal preferences or biases that they individually might have. But if the comps indicate something different, they have to yield to the comps, okay? So they might think that the property's really run down. They might think that a piecemeal update is not good enough. They might not like the quality of the kitchen cabinets. They might not like the color of the carpet. Whatever else, all these things they might have their own personal opinion on. But when they dig into the comps, if the comps suggest, because other houses, and they suggest this by other houses possessing these features and someone having closed on them, if the comps suggest that these things don't matter, then the appraiser's response must be they don't matter. Because at the end of the day, the comps make the rules. If you've ever been in one of my classes, I get asked a lot about different quality elements. And, like especially with basements, like does a basement need to have carpet? Does a basement need to have finished a drop ceiling or a drywall ceiling to count or to be given credit? And my answer is usually, well, look to the comps. What do the comps have? If they have these things, and this is what the market is demonstrating that it values, and therefore that's what the appraiser is going to say has value when they start reporting on market demand tolerances and preferences. So it really is sort of one of the harder parts about appraising sometimes, because we do have our personal preferences. I'll sort of tell them myself a little bit. I don't particularly love barndominiums, and so I know that if I'm asked to appraise a barndominium, I really got to make sure that I am approaching that report objectively. If the market prefers a barndominium to a stick-built home, to a brick stick-built home, then that's what I've got to accept and report on. If the market's paying more for a barndominium, even though I know they cost less to build, then I got to report that it's paying more, and let that be the case at the end of my report. Another thing I see sometimes is things like in markets where say it's sort of like an entry-level home and people are flipping properties. Sometimes the person doing the flip doesn't replace the kitchen cabinet. They just paint the old cabinets and they'll replace the bathroom. They'll do the less expensive stuff. But then they go out and of course, naturally, because they're trying to make a profit on this, they're going to price it the same as other properties that are flipped without regard for the links that those other flippers may have gone to. So I might be appraising a house where it's a remodel. The kitchen hasn't been replaced, it's just been painted, the minimum has been done. And I start looking at my comps, and maybe I've got a handful of them where somebody flipping that property has gone all out, replaced the kitchen, replaced the bathrooms, done replaced all of the interior components with something new. And I've got another bunch of comps where somebody's only done half, sort of done the minimum, like they've done on my subject. And they're all getting the same price. The market's paying the same thing for all of them. That is market evidence right there. The market just doesn't care. Okay? And so as a flipper, why would you do more if the market doesn't care? You have to be able to read the tea leaves of what buyers want. And that's the appraiser's job. It kind of doesn't, an appraiser will be quick to say cost doesn't equal value. And especially when a homeowner is trying to, or a listing agent is trying to convince us that, the people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on all of these extra things, and we should get hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra value for all those things. An appraiser will be quick to say cost does not equal value. You can spend money and get nothing back at any given time on any given item in a home. But then it becomes a little bit harder to stick to that line when you look at something where somebody has cut corners on costs, but they've gotten full value. I think that the bias would lean towards, giving some extra value for what somebody spent money on. Naturally, anybody would want to do that. It's just human. But you can't if the comps don't indicate that you should. So that is, that's how we handle it. And again, it is the comps make the rules and set the standards for anything that we do in appraising. So, and even that is sort of like the downside of that sometimes can be that the comps, like when that flip, the comps simply don't show that something's worth any value. You could have tons and tons of decks and patios, and if the appraiser can't find comps that have those things, they can't say that the market is giving any extra money for them because they can't find it. As the agent, we can go out and try to prove that, but it might require our buyer coming out of pocket with some cash in order to prove it, because again, if the appraiser can't find comps, then they can't say to the lender that it's got value, and the lender can't lend on that if the appraiser can't say it has value. These are all just sort of the nuances, the practical, everyday things that agents have to be able to navigate. But I guess I've kind of gotten off on down a rabbit hole there. But you've got the long and short of how the appraiser deals with their own personal preferences. We have to really work hard to not let them get in the way of being objective, regardless. And sometimes that's hard for us. Sometimes it makes bad news for the people who are on the receiving end of our reports. But if you're ever in doubt, the answers and the comps, I guess I'll go off on one final little rabbit hole. If you happen to be a real estate developer or investor, as I am sometimes, this is what I suggest you use as your blueprint for whatever you're building. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Pull the comps, look at the closed sales and what buyers are demonstrating they want. If you're in that to make a profit, then naturally doing the minimum, meeting the minimum buyer expectation is often the way to the most profit. So, learn to read those comps like a blueprint for where you should go in your renovation or remodel or flip, and it will pay off for you. It at least won't. I've never had it not pay off. I've never had a losing scenario where I really let the comps be the guide and let them sort of rein in the scope of the project. Keep it in line. Don't get. There's really not. Sometimes there's a benefit in some markets to being the biggest and the best, but usually the smartest course of action is staying in line. So anyway, I hope that helps. Sorry, it got a little rambly, but if we can ever be of service to you doing an appraisal and helping you sort out the value of any sort of subjective item, we are happy to do that. You can find us at appraiserpool.com. We can also do professional measurements or consultations. If you enjoyed this, I would love it if you subscribed. And otherwise, I thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next week.